Adam Schiff, thank you for joining us on short notice, sir.
Good to be with you.
Let's start with a non-political question. How did you feel when you learned that you were being targeted this way by the United States government?
Look, shocked on the one hand, not surprised on the other. I did wonder, for a few years with the president calling for our committee to be investigated, calling for me to be investigated, whether, the department was going to do it. Certainly it looks like they were going after records of the committee, including my own. What they were looking for, I still don't know. Apparently they didn't find anything, but when they wanted to close down the investigation, Barr wouldn't let them. It's just another terrible abuse of the rule of law, the Department of Justice. I spent almost 6 years with the Department of Justice. I love my experience there. I venerate the department, and to see how it was turned into this bludgeon to go after the president's enemies and a shield to protect those who lied for him, people like Roger Stone and Mike Flynn and others. It's disgraceful, but it's also such a body blow to our democracy.
Does it matter to you that they used grand juries to get this subpoena? Does that add legitimacy to the efforts?
It doesn't add legitimacy. It just kind of expands the abuse to abuse the grand jury process in this way. While I can't go into who received these subpoenas or whose records were sought, I can't say that it was extraordinarily broad. People having nothing to do with the intelligence matters that are at least being reported on. It just shows what a broad fishing expedition it was, and so many norms were broken in connection with this. The norm of a president not involving himself in specific cases. Here you got the president calling on his opponents to be investigated. The norm of the president seeking records from a member of Congress and staff and doing so on a partisan basis. Going after a committee that was investigating him. One guardrail after another just smashed by this unethical former president. And just shows you how much we are reliant on people to say no. And if they don't stand up to an unethical president, how quickly the guardrails can come down.
Well, two shocking things here. One, the situation is actually a little bit more perverse than even you suggested, because according to the New York Times, and as seconded by CNN in major part, the cases were looked at under Sessions, closed. Barr comes in 2020, and it's not just about keeping them going. It's restarting them. He brings in somebody new. He creates a new circle of trust. He is told by staffers, yeah, there's really nothing there. That's why the cases are closed. And reopens them. And the only thing that changed during that period, other than him, was Trump saying he wanted you looked at. Have you ever heard of anything like this before?
No, certainly not. And, we brought about these new norms after Watergate to prevent exactly this kind of abuse. But they didn't survive this presidency. But it is shocking. At the same time, look, Bill Barr lied to the country about the Mueller report. He lied to Congress about what he was aware of, Mueller's objections to his false summary. He had a long pattern of duplicity, as well as intervening in specific cases of Roger Stone and Mike Flynn to try to protect those who were lying to cover up for the president, and to authorize investigations of his opponents. I view Bill Barr as the second most dangerous person in the country after Donald Trump, and this is just further proof of that point.
Without revealing their identities, to your knowledge, how many people were swept up in this effort in terms of looking at people's records?
A lot. And the reality is, I don't fully know how many, because, and I think we'll find out about more now that the story has broken, because people got these notices, these emails from Apple, and thought they were either spam or that they were, some kind of a spear phishing attempt or something. And so I'm not sure that we know how many are impacted. And, I would like to know, we've asked the Justice Department, was this just
Well,
going
they
after
know.
Democrats and
Yeah.
Democratic staff? They know. They know.
They know exactly who
Um,
was looked at and for what period. Just to be clear, before people misconstrue the idea about Apple, Apple was under a gag order.
yeah.
And obviously, you know all this, Chairman. But for the audience, so the DOJ said, you're going to give us these records and you're going to shut up. And ordinarily, that the period that they look for records is much shorter than how long someone is gagged to give them time to make a case. So Apple just started telling people last month. There was another provider who was telling people early last year that they had been asked about this. So Apple, didn't choose not to do this. They weren't allowed to do it, as far as we understand, under the gag order. But in terms of the scope of this, in just the last week, okay, people say don't look back. You have to, because such a big part of Trump's attraction was that he was going to go and disrupt the chaos. He was going to go in there and disrupt the ugliness and the deep state stuff. In just the last week, the CNN revelations, Meadows asking the DOJ to investigate nonsensical allegations of election fraud, the Rudy tape, Zelensky's assistant, the president of Ukraine at that time, watching and listening, echoing that, yeah, Rudy did it and then Trump did it. All of this was going on. And then the DOJ was being used as the muscle arm to shut people down who were going after the president's behavior. I mean, I can't think. I mean, it literally makes Watergate look like jaywalking.
Well, I remember during Marie Yovanovitch's testimony, and this was this courageous ambassador to Ukraine that the president and his son and others just ruthlessly smeared to the point where her life was in danger. I remember during her testimony, she was called by the State Department and said, you need to get back to Washington right away. You need to be on the next plane. And she was incredulous, what's happening, what's going on? And she talked about how she wondered, am I under investigation or something? And I remember thinking, I know how you feel. Now, I didn't know about this at the time, but I never expected in this country to feel the way that so many people do in the developing world, that they could be the subject of investigation by an unscrupulous executive just because they want it done. That's such a terrible turn for this country. We've got to put up stronger guardrails to make sure this kind of thing never happens again.
So what do you see as remedial here? The statement from the committee is, I have all this paper on my desk. The statement from the committee is that you look forward to information from the DOJ about this and you support an internal investigation. What needs to be done here? The good news is many of the people who are at the top of the food chain during these efforts are still at the DOJ, meaning that there will be a higher degree of compliance expected, assuming there's no criminality attached. And Andrew McCabe said, and I suggest the same, it's not a criminal situation at this point. What do you want to have happen?
Well, look, I think there needs to be an internal investigation within the Department of Justice, not just involving, this abuse of power with respect to our committee, but also what they were doing to reporters and press organizations, the Attorney General's intervention in specific cases like Roger Stone and Mike Flynn and others. I mean, in the case of Mike Flynn, this person who twice pled guilty, Barr went to the extraordinary step of seeking to have that case dismissed. The judge in that case appointed someone to advocate against the Justice Department. I mean, that just doesn't happen very often, if ever. And so I think the department needs to really clean house and look at all of these ways in which the department was abused and take corrective steps and implement new policies to make sure that this doesn't happen again. In terms of the Congress, I can't play a role because they went after some of my records. But I do think the department needs to do a lot of self-examination, get to the bottom of how it was misused and abused, and take corrective action.
Why are you conflicted out when you were victimized by the effort? They didn't find anything on you. The case is closed against you, and there was never any proof brought to any kind of point of consequence.
No, that's true. But, I think there would be a perception that I have a personal stake. And of course, as a victim of this, I do. So, look, I think that others are better situated to look into this than I am. But I think most important, because the department is going to be very reluctant to share, and it's going to be a fight to get information, we need to encourage the new attorney general to do an internal and independent investigation and take corrective action.
And just one more circle back on something that CNN is trying to nail down, that there were over 100 people in the basket of who they were collecting records on. Does that sound like anything that's familiar to your understanding of the scope of the situation?
I really don't know.
Right.
But it wouldn't surprise me if it was an extraordinary number, because just the circle that I'm aware of was so overbroad that they clearly were not discriminating. They were simply fishing and looking to validate the president's continued false attacks and smears.
This is exactly what people thought Trump would change, which is something like a deep state where they're using an institution of government to investigate you in search of proof against you, as opposed to proof driving an investigation. It is exactly what they thought he would change, and he was the ugliest example of the problem I've ever seen. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you very much. Appreciate you being with us, Chairman. We'll be right back.
Thank you.